Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch, powered by the Smart Investor Singapore. It's Thursday, the 12th of January, and we have our regular Thursday guest, David Kuo, who is back from the UK, founder of the Smart Investor Singapore. David, good afternoon.
Hey, selamat tengah hari, Brian. How are you?
Now, Selamat Tengah Hari, very good to have you on the show again. Welcome back to Singapore. Now, before we get your insights, we're going to take a look and see how regional stock markets have performed and also take a look at crypto markets, which have staged quite a bit of a comeback. We start with Bitcoin. Bitcoin has breached the 18,000 mark. It's at 18,207. It's up 4.56%. Ethereum is at 1,402. It's up 5.35%. Now, looking across the regional equity markets, we start with the SGX. That's down 0.27%. KLCI is unchanged. Shanghai is down 0.22%. The ASX All Ordinaries is up 1.04%. The Nikkei is down 0.01%. The Hang Seng is down 0.28%. And rounding up the numbers, we've got the Kospi, which is up 0.49%. David, is a pretty mixed bag today compared to the sea of green yesterday. Tell us why.
Yeah, 3 downs today, and then 1 flat, and then a couple on the upside. So it's nice to see that not only normal service has resumed with me coming back to Singapore, but normal service has resumed on the stock market as well. So we're not getting those blockbuster rises that we had when I was over in the UK. And as to why, Brian, I think it's because even though America was up last night quite significantly, I think the reason why the stock markets are a little bit more pensive at the moment is because of one key data number coming out in the US tonight. It's the inflation number, and everybody is fixated on what that inflation number is going to be. Over in America, they think that the inflation number is going to be weaker than expected, which therefore means that there's going to be less pressure on the Fed. But over here in Asia, we're probably slightly more circumspect, and we want to see what those numbers are going to be like before they start putting their money to work, Brian.
Now, I want to shift the conversation to something that's occupying a lot of investor time now, is really looking at this rise in China and that stock market recovery along and basically the overall theme of China's reopening and China's recovery story. Walk us through your views on this and what you think it's going to impact the Asian markets.
You know, that's really interesting, Brian, because if you have a look around the world, there aren't really any great stories out there. You have a look at America, and they're talking about America going into possible recession this year, and the Federal Reserve is going to carry on with its high interest rate policy until such time that they see some tangible evidence that inflation is on the way down in America. So that doesn't seem like a great story for investors. Then you have a look at Europe, and it's almost the same story over there. Interest rates by the ECB are going to remain relatively high, and maybe Europe is going to go into recession as well. So when you have two of the great economic blocs, America and Europe, not doing particularly well, you then focus your attention to somewhere else, and you say, hey, there's China. China's reopening. Let's all plow into China. And the Chinese government seems to be making all the right noises at the moment. They're talking about trying to save the property market. They're being a little bit more relaxed about the tech industry, and they're still talking about trying to get consumers to drive economic growth in China. So that seems like a great story. And a lot of the money managers out there are saying, well, since we can't really talk about the US, we can't talk about the Europe, let's talk about China instead. Because ultimately, fund managers have to raise money. They have to try and sort of get investors' money coming in. So when there are no good stories over in the West, let's go and have a look at the East. But I think we're missing the point there. I mean, when you invest in an economy, when you invest in a country, you must have confidence in the government of that country. And this is where China poses a problem for me, because I just think there is a key man risk there. there is one guy who is calling the shots, and he calls the shots with regards to lockdown. We're going to lock down the entire country, regardless of wherever it is. And then economic activity grinds to a total halt. And then there is a little bit of unease in the country. I'm not going to call it an insurrection, but there was certainly a lot of noise in the country. And it wasn't just made by young people. It was made by older people, pensioners as well, who were fed up with the lockdown. And then almost suddenly, overnight, lockdown became a thing of the past. Nobody talked about lockdown at all. And as far as I was concerned, it was really a case of the Communist Party of China trying to save its own skin because it realized that there was a problem there. And so therefore they said, no lockdown, we're reopening and everything is fine. We're not going to talk about lockdown or anything ever again. And in fact, they're not even talking about how many people are dying in China at the moment. So it's almost as though they're sacrificing the people in order to save the Communist Party. But as far as money managers are concerned, they go, oh, let's forget about all of that. Let's just put our money into China because that's the only growth story that's around. And that I find to be quite dangerous, Brian. And it doesn't
David,
really yes.
No, go ahead, please continue.
It doesn't really matter whether we're talking about a country or whether we're talking about a company. Key man risk is something that you need to consider very, very seriously. And when you have a key man in a business, and he also happens to be the biggest shareholder calling the shots, then I think you have to be a little bit more circumspect about investing in that company. If the guy is good, then that's fine. If the guy is a bit flaky, then I think you have a problem. And if the guy's a bit mercurial and you don't quite know what he's going to do from one day to the next, you have a problem. And I think the same goes for China. Because there is no accountability in China, I am not really that prepared to commit a huge amount of money to China. That doesn't mean I don't think that, yes, the Chinese consumers are going to be wealthier as a result of what's going on. But if I want to play China, I'll certainly buy shares in companies like Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, McDonald's. I'll do that, but I'm not going to be investing in any of the Chinese companies.
Now, speaking of those names, we're coming up to earnings season. US bank reporting starts tomorrow. What are the expectations there? Because banks tend to do well in an inflationary environment.
Well, they certainly do. Not just inflationary, in a rising interest rate environment. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot of the banks reporting very high net interest incomes because it's just free money for them. You have a loan with the bank and the bank says, I'm going to be increasing the interest rates. I mean, what choice do you have? You're going to have to pay the higher interest rates or you're going to default. And I think what we're going to be seeing in the banks coming up is really good numbers from banks like Citibank, JP Morgan. I mean, they're going to be sort of really sterling numbers. And when I speak to you next week, Brian, I think we'll be turning our attention to many of the Asian banks and seeing how they are going to be performing. And if the American banks do well, I would suspect that the Asian banks will do well as well.
Now, on that note, David, thanks for your insights. Thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now, we've been speaking to David Kuo, founder of the Smart Invest in Singapore, on BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch, powered by the Smart Investor Singapore. I'm Brian Fernandez. This video will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our social media platforms. It'll also be on our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.